In the forgotten corner of Nevada, where the desert stretched like a canvas of cracked earth, the town of Red Hollow baked under a relentless sun. Tumbleweeds rolled lazily across the single road that cut through the place, a scar of asphalt flanked by sagging buildings and rusted signs. The air carried the faint hum of a distant generator, the only sound to break the oppressive silence. At the edge of town, an old airfield lay abandoned, its hangars slumped like tired sentinels, their corrugated roofs glinting dully in the heat. No one asked about the airfield. No one cared, except for one woman. Her name was Claire Mason, though the locals just called her the mechanic. She was a shadow in Red Hollow, a woman in her late 30s with sharp green eyes and calloused hands that knew engines better than most knew their own hearts. She wore faded overalls, her dark hair tied back in a messy braid, and she moved with a quiet purpose that made people look away. They didn't trust her, not because she'd done anything wrong, but because she didn't belong. A woman fixing engines in a town that barely remembered what ambition felt like. She was an oddity, a curiosity to be ignored. But Claire wasn't just a mechanic. The townsfolk didn't know about the scars hidden under her sleeves, earned in skies far from Red Hollow. They didn't know about the dog tags she kept in a locked box under her bed or the nightmares that woke her at 3 a.m., her heart pounding to the rhythm of jet engines. And they certainly didn't know about the sleek, black aircraft hidden in the depths of Hangar 7, its wings cloaked in shadows and secrets. Have you ever been underestimated, judged before you could prove yourself? Share your story in the comments. Claire's days were predictable, a rhythm of grease and steel. She ran a small repair shop at the edge of the airfield, fixing tractors and pickups for the few farmers who still clung to Red Hollow's dying soil. The shop was a cluttered sanctuary of tools and spare parts, the air thick with the scent of oil and metal. A dusty radio played old country tunes, barely audible over the clank of her wrench. She worked alone, her only company the occasional stray cat that slunk in for scraps. The townsfolk whispered about her. Too quiet, they'd say. A woman like that, living alone out there? Something's off. They didn't know she'd flown missions in places they'd never heard of, that her hands had steadied a fighter jet through storms of anti-aircraft fire. They didn't know she'd been a captain in the Air Force, one of the youngest to ever fly the experimental X-47 prototype. And they didn't know why she'd walked away from it all, trading the sky for a life of obscurity. Claire didn't care what they thought. She had her reasons for staying in Red Hollow, reasons tied to a promise she'd made years ago. In her mind's eye, she could still see her father's face, Colonel James Mason, his eyes bright with pride as he pinned her wings on her uniform. "You're meant for the stars, Claire," he'd said. "Don't let anyone ground you." He died 2 years later, shot down in a mission the government never acknowledged. His last letter to her, tucked in that locked box, ended with a single line: "Keep the sky free." That promise kept her in Red Hollow, close to the airfield where her father had once trained pilots. It was her way of honoring him, even if it meant living in the shadows. But the airfield held another secret, one that Claire guarded with her life. Inside Hangar 7, behind a false wall, was the Raven, a prototype jet she'd helped design in her Air Force days. It was a ghost of a machine, invisible to radar, faster than anything in the sky. She'd stolen it, or rather, saved it, when the program was scrapped, and she'd spent years keeping it hidden, waiting for a day she hoped would never come. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning when the desert air was thick with the promise of a storm. Claire was elbow-deep in a tractor engine when she heard the crunch of gravel outside. She wiped her hands on a rag and stepped into the blinding sunlight, squinting at the black SUV parked in front of her shop. 2 men in crisp suits stepped out, their polished shoes absurd against the dusty ground. They carried themselves with the arrogance of authority, the kind that came from boardrooms and government contracts. "Claire Mason?" the taller one asked, his voice clipped. He had a face like a hawk, sharp and unyielding. "We're with NextCorp. We need to talk." NextCorp. The name sent a chill down Claire's spine. The aerospace giant had swallowed half the defense contracts in the country, its tentacles reaching into every military base and government office. They'd been the ones who shut down the X-47 program, deeming it too costly. Claire had never trusted them, not after the rumors of black market deals and missing prototypes. "What do you want?" she asked, her tone flat. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, her wrench still in hand. The hawk-faced man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We're reactivating the airfield. NextCorp has a new project, and we need your expertise." Claire's stomach twisted. She'd heard whispers of NextCorp's latest venture, a drone program called Sentinel, designed to patrol the skies with unmatched precision. But the rumors went darker. Unregulated tech, surveillance without oversight, and a trail of accidents swept under the rug. She wanted no part of it. "I fix tractors," she said. "Find someone else." The second man, shorter and stockier, stepped forward. "This isn't a request, Ms. Mason. Your skills are unique. We know about your history." Her grip tightened on the wrench. They knew. Not about the Raven, she'd covered her tracks too well, but about her past as a pilot. They were digging, and that meant trouble. "Get off my property," she said, her voice low but steady. The hawk-faced man chuckled. "You'll regret that. We'll be back." As the SUV sped away, kicking up clouds of dust, Claire's mind raced. NextCorp wasn't just sniffing around, they were closing in. And if they were reactivating the airfield, they'd find the Raven. She couldn't let that happen. The jet wasn't just a machine, it was her father's legacy, a symbol of a sky free from corporate greed. Have you ever had to stand up to someone more powerful than you? What did you do? Share in the comments. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed, the locked box open in her lap. Her father's dog tags gleamed in the moonlight, cold against her fingers. She traced the engraved letters of his name, her chest tight with memories. He'd taught her to fly, to trust her instincts, to fight for what was right. "The sky's only free if someone protects it," he'd said. She'd failed him once, when she couldn't save him. She wouldn't fail him again. By dawn, she'd made up her mind. She slipped into Hangar 7 under the cover of darkness, the air inside cool and heavy with the scent of metal. The Raven waited, its sleek lines catching the faint glow of her flashlight. She ran her hand along its wing, feeling the pulse of possibility. It was time to act. The next day, a convoy rolled into Red Hollow. Trucks, drones, and more suits, all bearing NextCorp's logo. They set up at the airfield, cordoning off the area with chain-link fences and security cameras. The townsfolk watched from a distance, curious but too apathetic to care. Claire, however, was watching closer. She'd rigged a small drone of her own, a scrap-built thing that hovered just out of sight, feeding her grainy footage of the operation. What she saw confirmed her worst fears. NextCorp wasn't just testing drones, they were modifying them, arming them with tech that looked military-grade. Worse, they were sloppy. The footage showed technicians bypassing safety protocols, rushing to meet deadlines. Claire recognized the signs of a disaster waiting to happen. She'd seen it before, in the X-47 program, when corners were cut and lives were lost. Then she found the memo. It was buried in a hacked email from one of NextCorp's servers, a task she'd accomplished with skills she hadn't used in years. The memo detailed a test flight scheduled for the following week, a live demonstration of the Sentinel drones for a group of foreign buyers. The drones were unstable, the memo admitted, but NextCorp was pushing forward to secure a multi-billion-dollar contract. If the test failed, the fallout could be catastrophic. Civilian lives, infrastructure, entire towns like Red Hollow at risk. Claire's blood ran cold. She thought of her father, of the promise she'd made. She thought of the people in Red Hollow, flawed and judgmental, but innocent. She couldn't stand by, but taking on NextCorp meant exposing herself, risking everything she'd built to stay hidden. It meant stepping back into the sky. For days, Claire prepared in secret. She worked on the Raven, tuning its engines until they purred like a living thing. She ran simulations in her head, calculating flight paths and contingencies. She didn't have a crew, no backup, just her and the jet. But that was enough. It had to be. The night before the test, she stood in Hangar 7, the Raven gleaming under the flickering lights. The desert wind howled outside, rattling the hangar doors. She closed her eyes, picturing her father's smile, hearing his voice. Keep the sky free. She would, even if it cost her everything. As she locked the hangar, a shadow moved in the darkness. A figure stepped forward. Tom, the grizzled bartender from Red Hollow's only bar. He was one of the few who'd ever shown her kindness, slipping her extra coffee when she worked late. Now his face was grim. I know what you're doing, he said. Saw you sneaking around the airfield. Whatever it is, Claire, it's big. And it's dangerous. She tensed, ready to deny it, but Tom raised a hand. I'm not here to stop you. Just be careful. This town's got nothing, but it's got you. Don't let them take that. Claire nodded, her throat tight. For the first time, she felt seen, not as the mechanic, but as herself. It was enough to carry her forward. The next morning, the airfield buzzed with activity. NextCorp's drones were lined up on the tarmac, their sleek bodies glinting in the sun. Suits and military brass milled about, their voices drowned out by the whine of engines. Claire watched from a ridge overlooking the airfield, her heart pounding. The Raven was hidden nearby, ready to launch. She didn't know exactly what she'd do: disrupt the test, expose the truth, or something else entirely. But she knew one thing. Today, the sky would be hers again. What would you risk to protect what matters to you? Share your story below. The story pauses here, with Claire poised on the edge of action, the desert wind carrying the weight of her choice. What will she do when the drones take flight? Will she outmaneuver NextCorp, or will their power crush her? Stay tuned for part 2 to find out. If you believe in standing up for what's right, share this story. Let's inspire each other. The Nevada sun burned high above Red Hollow, casting harsh shadows across the airfield. The whine of NextCorp's Sentinel drones filled the air, a mechanical scream that drowned out the desert's usual silence. Claire Mason crouched on the ridge, her green eyes locked on the tarmac below. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with the familiar rush of a mission. The Raven, her hidden jet, waited in a concealed ravine nearby, its black hull blending with the shadows of the rocky terrain. Today, she'd fly again. Today, she'd keep her promise to her father. Keep the sky free. Below, NextCorp's operation was in full swing. The drones, sleek, predatory machines with angular wings and glowing sensors, stood in neat rows, their engines warming up. Men in suits and military uniforms clustered around a temporary command center, a glass-walled trailer bristling with antennas. Claire's hacked drone feed, displayed on a battered tablet in her hand, showed her the truth. These drones weren't just for surveillance. Their payloads included experimental munitions, unstable and untested, designed to impress the foreign buyers watching from a VIP tent. If even one drone malfunctioned, the fallout could level half of Red Hollow. Claire's jaw tightened. She'd seen this before, corporate greed dressed up as progress, cutting corners at the cost of lives. Her father had died in a similar game, a classified mission gone wrong because someone prioritized profit over safety. She wouldn't let it happen again. But taking on NextCorp meant exposing the Raven, risking her freedom, and facing a system that had already buried her once. She didn't care. The sky was hers, and she'd fight for it. She slipped down the ridge, her boots kicking up clouds of dust, and reached the ravine where the Raven waited. The jet was a marvel of engineering. Stealth tech, hypersonic engines, a cockpit designed for a single pilot. She'd kept it maintained for years, a silent tribute to her father's dream. Now it was her weapon. She climbed inside, the familiar scent of leather and electronics wrapping around her like an old friend. Her fingers danced across the controls, waking the jet with a low hum. The cockpit canopy closed with a hiss, sealing her in. For the first time in years, Claire felt alive. Have you ever had a moment when you knew you had to act, no matter the cost? Share in the comments. The Raven shot into the sky, its engines a controlled roar that sent shockwaves through the desert. Claire's hands were steady on the controls, her eyes scanning the heads-up display. The jet was invisible to radar, a ghost in the air, but she knew NextCorp's sensors would pick up something soon. She had minutes, maybe less, before they realized what was happening. Below, the Sentinel drones began their test flight, rising in formation like a flock of mechanical vultures. The VIPs clapped politely, unaware of the danger. Claire's tablet, strapped to the console, showed the hacked feed from NextCorp's command center. The technicians were already nervous, their voices crackling over intercepted comms. "Drone 3's showing a power spike. Should we abort?" The response was cold. "Negative. The buyers are watching. Proceed." Claire's blood boiled. She banked the Raven hard, slicing through a cloud bank to stay hidden. Her plan was risky: disrupt the test by jamming the drone's signals, forcing them to land before they could misfire. She'd rigged a makeshift EMP device from parts in her shop, powerful enough to scramble the drone's systems without causing permanent damage. But she'd have to get close, dangerously close, and fly through a storm of NextCorp's countermeasures. The desert blurred beneath her, a tapestry of sand and rock. The Raven's engine sang, a deep, resonant growl that vibrated through her bones. She remembered her father's voice. "The sky's only free if someone protects it." She pushed the throttle forward, the jet responding like an extension of her will. The drones were climbing now, their formation tightening as they prepared for their demonstration. Claire's HUD lit up with targeting data, her EMP device locked onto the drone's frequency. Then an alarm blared in the cockpit. NextCorp had spotted her. A voice crackled over an open channel. "Unidentified aircraft, this is NextCorp security. Identify yourself or be engaged." Claire ignored it, her focus razor-sharp. She dove low, skimming the desert floor, kicking up a trail of dust that shimmered in the sunlight. The drones were directly ahead, their sensors glowing like eyes in the haze. She activated the EMP, a pulse of energy rippling from the Raven. The drones wobbled, their lights flickering as their systems glitched. One veered off course, its engines sputtering. Claire's heart leapt. Her plan was working. But then, a new threat appeared on her HUD. 2 NextCorp interceptors, armed and closing fast. They weren't drones. They were manned fighters, likely mercenaries hired to protect the test. Claire's lips curled into a grim smile. She'd faced worse odds. When have you had to outsmart a bigger opponent? Tell us your story below. The interceptors were sleek, modern jets, their hulls gleaming with NextCorp's logo. They fired a warning shot, missiles streaking past the Raven with a scream that echoed through the cockpit. Claire yanked the stick, pulling the Raven into a vertical climb that made her stomach lurch. The G-forces pressed her into the seat, but her hands were steady, her mind clear. She hadn't flown like this in years, but muscle memory took over, honed by countless missions. The desert became a blur as she twisted the Raven through a series of evasive maneuvers. The interceptors followed, their pilots skilled but predictable. Claire knew their type, hired guns who flew by the book. She didn't. She rolled the Raven into a corkscrew dive, skimming so close to the ground that she could see the cracks in the earth. One interceptor overshot, its pilot cursing over the comms as he struggled to keep up. Claire's HUD showed the drones spiraling out of control, their systems fried by the EMP. But the test wasn't over. NextCorp's command center was rerouting power, trying to regain control. Claire needed to finish this now. She targeted the lead drone, the one carrying the heaviest payload, and fired a precise burst from the Raven's onboard cannons, non-lethal rounds designed to disable, not destroy. The drone's wings shattered, and it plummeted, crashing harmlessly into the desert. The crowd below gasped, the VIPs scrambling from their tent. NextCorp's technicians shouted over the comms, their voices laced with panic. Claire didn't stop. She swung the Raven around, dodging another missile from the interceptors. Her EMP had one more pulse left, but she needed to get closer to the command center to take out their backup systems. She pushed the jet to its limits, the airframe shuddering as she broke the sound barrier with a thunderous boom. The interceptors were relentless, their missiles locking onto her heat signature. Claire's mind raced, calculating angles and trajectories. She remembered a trick her father had taught her, a risky maneuver called the ghost loop. She pulled the Raven into a near-vertical climb, then cut the engines, letting the jet stall and drop like a stone. The interceptors overshot again, their missiles sailing harmlessly into the sky. Claire restarted the engines, the Raven roaring back to life as she leveled out just above the ground. The command center was in sight now, a glass and steel box glinting in the sun. Claire armed the final EMP pulse, her finger hovering over the trigger. But then a new voice cut through the comms. Not the mercenaries, but the hawk-faced man from NextCorp. "Stand down, Mason," he said, his voice cold. "You don't know what you're up against. Surrender, and we'll let you walk away." Claire's lips tightened. She thought of her father, of the letter in her locked box. Keep the sky free. She pressed the trigger. The EMP pulse hit the command center like a silent shockwave, frying their systems. Monitors went dark, drones crashed, and the airfield fell into chaos. Claire banked the Raven hard, climbing into the clouds to vanish. Have you ever defied the odds to do what's right? Share your story in the comments. Claire landed the Raven in a hidden canyon miles from Red Hollow, its stealth systems keeping it off NextCorp's radar. She climbed out, her legs shaking from adrenaline, and leaned against the jet, catching her breath. The desert was quiet again, the only sound the whisper of wind through the rocks. She'd done it. She'd stopped the test, exposed NextCorp's recklessness. But at what cost? Her tablet buzzed with a new message intercepted from NextCorp's servers. It was a news alert. Unauthorized aircraft disrupts military test in Nevada. The report was vague, blaming an unknown pilot for the chaos. NextCorp was already spinning the story, covering their tracks. Claire wasn't surprised. She'd known they'd bury the truth, but she'd saved lives, and that was enough. As she trekked back to Red Hollow, the town came into view, its lights flickering in the dusk. She expected to slip back into her quiet life, to fade into the shadows again. But when she reached her shop, a small crowd was waiting. Tom, the bartender, stood at the front, his grizzled face breaking into a rare smile. Behind him were others, farmers, shopkeepers, even some of the kids who'd once mocked her. "We saw it," Tom said. "The jet, the drones going down. That was you, wasn't it?" Claire hesitated, then nodded. There was no point lying now. The crowd murmured, not with judgment, but with something new: respect. A young girl stepped forward, holding out a folded piece of paper. "I drew this for you," she said shyly. It was a crude sketch of a jet soaring through the sky, a single word scrawled beneath it: hero. Claire's throat tightened. She took the drawing, her fingers trembling. For years she'd hidden, convinced no one would see her for who she was. Now they did. Not as the mechanic, not as the outcast, but as the pilot who'd risked everything to protect them. Days later, Claire sat in her shop, the drawing pinned to the wall beside her father's dog tags. NextCorp had pulled out of Red Hollow, their operation in tatters. The airfield was quiet again, its secrets safe for now. Claire knew they'd come for her eventually. NextCorp didn't forget, but she was ready. The Raven was hidden, her skills sharper than ever. She'd fight again if she had to. As she worked on a tractor engine, the radio crackled with a news report. Whistleblowers had leaked NextCorp's memo, exposing their reckless drone program. Claire smiled. She hadn't just stopped the test, she'd sparked a reckoning. Her father would have been proud. She stepped outside, the desert sky stretching endlessly above. The stars were bright, unmarred by city lights. Claire thought of her father's words, etched into her soul: keep the sky free. She had, and she would again. She didn't come for glory, she came for truth. If you believe in fighting for what's right, share this story. Let's honor the silent heroes among us.